A black Lincoln Navigator kicked up a cloud of red dust on the dirt road and pulled right up to a modest white farmhouse. Oklahoma plains stretched flat and endless behind it. 3-car doors opened at the same time. Out stepped 2 men in suits that cost more than Walter Briggs earned in a month. And behind them, Richard Calloway III, adjusting his cufflinks like he was walking into a boardroom, not a 72-year-old man's front yard. His Italian loafers were polished to a mirror shine. Walter's boots were worn leather with the soles caked in dried mud and a steel toe showing through on the left one. Walter stood up from his porch chair. He didn't say a word. He'd learned a long time ago that men like Calloway talk enough for everyone. Calloway climbed the porch steps, scanning the property with visible disgust. His lip curled at the peeling paint. 30 days, Briggs. Calloway didn't shake his hand, didn't look him in the eye. He was reading something on his phone. You've got 30 days to clear out. Every fence post, every piece of rust you call equipment. All of it. Walter's jaw tightened. This farm's been in my family since 1940. I don't care if it's been here since Moses. Calloway finally looked up. His eyes landed on the small framed photograph sitting on the porch railing. A picture of Walter's late wife, Margaret, smiling in a yellow sundress, taken the summer before she died. Calloway picked up that frame with his manicured hand, tilted it, studied it like it was nothing. Then he held it out over the railing and let it drop. It hit the mud face down. The glass cracked in 3 places. Margaret's bright eyes still smiling underneath those fractures. She'd be embarrassed by what you've become. Walter's hands trembled, not from weakness, from restraint. His fist clenched at his side, knuckles turning white against sun-darkened skin. Then Calloway kicked the wooden rocking chair, the one Walter had built by hand for Margaret 40 years ago from oak he'd milled himself, clean off the porch. It landed on its side in the gravel. He turned back to his lawyers. File it Monday. I want him gone. The Lincoln Navigator pulled away. A wall of dust swallowed the porch. Walter stood alone, motionless, as the rocking chair lay on its side in the yard. Inside, the farmhouse was simple, spotless. A wooden cross on the wall, a kitchen table with 1 placemat, 1 coffee mug, 1 chair pushed in. Walter sat at that kitchen table for a long time after the dust from Calloway's SUV settled. He went outside, picked up the photograph from the mud, and wiped Margaret's face clean with his shirt sleeve. The glass was ruined, but her smile was untouched underneath. He peeled the broken glass away carefully, got a small cut on his thumb, didn't flinch. Then he put the photo right back on the railing where it belonged. Now, you need to understand something about Walter Briggs. This man was not a complainer. He had worked this land since he was 14 years old. Took it over from his father, Henry, who died in the winter of 1974, dropped right there in the north field, mid-furrow, heart attack at 51. Walter was 23. He buried his father on a Tuesday and was back on the tractor by Thursday, because the wheat wouldn't wait. And nobody else was coming. There was an old black and white photograph in the hallway of a younger Walter standing next to his father beside a John Deere tractor. Both men squinting into the sun, not smiling, just solid. 2 sets of the same jaw. Margaret came along in 1978. She was a schoolteacher from Enid. Didn't know a thing about farming the day she married him, but she learned. They raised 2 boys on this land. Put both of them through college. Kept the lights on through droughts. Through wheat prices that crashed so low Walter joked the grain elevator should pay him to haul it away. They survived 2 tornadoes that peeled the roof clean off. They rebuilt both times. Same house. Same land. Same people. The kitchen corkboard still held those faded family photos. Birthday parties in the yard. 2 boys in Little League uniforms. Margaret hanging laundry on a line with the farmhouse golden behind her in the evening light. Margaret passed in 2021. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. The doctor said it like he was reading a weather report. Walter sat in that rocking chair every evening for a year afterward, talking to her like she could still hear him. Maybe she could. And now a man in a $3,000 suit had kicked that chair into the gravel and told Walter his life didn't matter. Here's what Calloway was banking on. Walter had no lawyer, no savings account. The property taxes on his land had been climbing for 6 years straight, and that wasn't an accident. Calloway's company had been buying up acreage all around the county, driving property assessments through the roof. It was a squeeze play. Price the old families out, then scoop their land for pennies on the dollar. He'd done it to 11 farms already. On the kitchen counter sat a stack of envelopes. 3 of them stamped in red, past due. The property tax bill read $14,200. The checkbook beside it showed a balance of $1,340.16. Walter had already sold the cattle, sold the good tractor, sold Margaret's car, a 2009 Buick she'd kept in perfect condition. He was down to 80 acres of winter wheat and a prayer. And the prayer wasn't working the way he'd hoped. Walter Briggs held on to that farm for one reason. It was the only place where Margaret's memory still lived. Every room, every fence post, every sunset from that porch. If you believe a man's home should be respected, go ahead and tap that like and subscribe button. 2 weeks after Calloway's visit, Walter made a decision. If he was going to lose this place, he would not leave a single thing behind for that man to pick through. He'd clean out every building on the property himself. Sell what he could, donate the rest, burn what was left. He started with the big barn at dawn. A pale winter sky, his breath hanging in the cold air like smoke as he walked toward it with a cup of black coffee. That barn had been standing since 1946. Walter's father built it with lumber from the old sawmill in Canton the year after he came home from the Pacific. It was the kind of building that collected time, layers of a family's life stacked up like sediment. Old saddles, hay bales, tools hanging on nails, mason jars filled with bolts, a 1971 calendar still tacked to a post. Every corner held something forgotten. And in the very back, behind a wall of hay bales Walter hadn't moved in 20 years, sat something he'd nearly forgotten existed. He pulled those bales aside one at a time, sweating through his flannel, grunting with effort. Then he stopped. His body went still. His face changed. A truck, a 1951 Ford F1 pickup, faded red paint under a thick gray skin of dust. For flat tires, cobwebs stretched from the mirror to the wall like lace curtains. A beam of morning sunlight caught the chrome bumper through the dust. That truck looked like it had been sleeping for half a century. This was his father's truck. Henry Briggs drove this Ford every single day, to the feed store, to church, to the grain elevator, until one afternoon in 1968, when he backed it into this spot, cut the engine, and told 14-year-old Walter, "Leave it be." No explanation, no story, just leave it be. And you didn't question Henry Briggs. Not once. Not ever. But now, 56 years later, Walter needed to move it. So he grabbed the door handle and pulled. The door groaned open on rusted hinges. Inside the cab, a cracked vinyl bench seat, a pair of stiff leatherwork gloves on the dash, a faded photo of Henry in his army dress uniform tucked behind the sun visor. Walter sat in the driver's seat, rested his hands on the steering wheel, right where his father's hands had been. Same knuckles, same grip. Closed his eyes, breathed in the ghost of Prince Albert pipe tobacco that still lived in the fabric after all these decades. Then he stepped out and walked to the back of the truck. The tailgate was rusted shut. Took a crowbar and both arms to wrench it open. In the bed, nothing remarkable. Some rotted feed sacks, a tangle of baling wire. But underneath the sacks, bolted directly to the bed of the truck with 4 heavy screws, was a military ammunition box. Steel, olive drab, the kind Henry brought home from the Pacific in 1945. Stenciled on the lid in faded white paint, SGT, H. Briggs, U.S. Army. A rusted master lock on the latch. Walter stared at it for a full minute, then went to the house, came back with a bolt cutter, and snapped the lock. The lid opened with a groan. Inside, a large manila envelope sealed with red wax. A smaller white envelope with handwriting on the front that read, "For Walter, when the time comes." And beneath both, a cracked leather folder. His hands were shaking as he opened the leather folder first. A legal document, yellowed but legible. The header read, "Mineral Rights Deed, County of Blaine, State of Oklahoma, March 14th, 1947. The name on the deed, Henry J. Briggs. Notarized. Stamped by the county clerk. 320 acres clearly described." Walter read it twice, then a third time. Then he sat down on the tailgate because his legs wouldn't hold him. His father, his quiet, pipe-smoking, never complained about thing in his life father, had owned the mineral rights to 320 acres of Oklahoma oil land. The same 320 acres that Callaway Energy had been drilling and pumping for the last 5 decades. And those oil derricks? They'd been visible from this barn Walter's entire life, pumping steadily on the horizon every single day he'd been alive. He opened the smaller envelope. The letter inside was written in Henry's hand, the same careful block letters Walter remembered from grocery lists and feed receipts tacked to the kitchen wall. His hands were trembling so hard the paper shook. He steadied it against his knee. "Son, if you're reading this, it means I didn't live long enough to set things right. In 1952, Charles Callaway came to me with a deal. I signed over temporary drilling access in exchange for quarterly royalty payments. He never paid a single dime. When I confronted him, he had his lawyer forge new papers claiming I'd sold the rights outright. I couldn't afford to fight him. I was a dirt farmer, and he owned the county judge. But I kept the originals. Every one. The proof is in this box. The Callaways stole what was ours. Don't let them keep it. Dad." Walter sat on the tailgate of that old Ford, letter in his lap, staring through the open barn doors at the oil derricks pumping in the distance. A single tear cut a line through the dust on his cheek. He didn't wipe it. Beneath the letter, 7 more documents. The original signed drilling agreement with Charles Callaway. Quarterly royalty receipts, every single one blank. Bank statements showing no deposits. And one final piece of paper that changed everything. A handwritten note on personal stationery. The letterhead, in engraved script, Charles R. Callaway. The first line read, "Henry, I know what I did was wrong, but you'll never prove it. Let it go." A written confession, in the first Callaway's own hand. The arrogance of a man so certain of his power that he put his crime in writing. Walter folded everything carefully back into the ammunition box, carried it to the kitchen table, set it down right next to Margaret's photograph. Then he picked up the phone and called Ruth Adkins, the one lawyer in Blaine County who had never taken a dollar from the Callaway family. 41 days later, the courtroom was standing room only. The Blaine County Courthouse, red brick, white columns, an American flag snapping in the Oklahoma wind, the parking lot overflowing with pickup trucks. Every farmer in the county was there. Every rancher. Every widow who'd watched her property taxes triple while Callaway bought the land next door for nothing. They sat in those wooden pews with their hats in their laps, and their jaws set, and their eyes locked forward. Rows of weathered faces. Men in clean Western shirts they only wore to church and funerals. Women with calloused hands folded in their laps. Nobody talking. Just waiting. Richard Callaway III sat at the defendant's table in a charcoal suit, his gold Rolex catching the courtroom light every time he moved his wrist. He was leaning back, smiling, whispering to his lead attorney. He'd brought 3 of them, one from Oklahoma City, one from Dallas. His manicured fingernails tapped the mahogany table like this was a formality, a minor inconvenience before lunch. Walter walked in wearing his one good jacket, navy blue, 2 buttons, the one Margaret bought him at JCPenney in 2004 for their anniversary. It was a little tight across the shoulders now. He carried the green ammunition box under his arm like a man carrying something sacred. The stencil, SGT, H. Briggs, clearly visible. His boots echoed on the hardwood floor. Every head turned to follow him. Calloway glanced over. The smirk flickered, just a half-second tremor at the corner of his mouth. Then it came back, but it was thinner now. Walter's lawyer, Ruth Adkins, 64 years old, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a beaded chain, a voice like a scalpel wrapped in velvet, stood and addressed the Honorable Judge Samuel Ware. Your Honor, we are presenting into evidence 7 original documents, notarized, dated, and authenticated, that prove the Calloway family has been operating on fraudulently obtained mineral rights for exactly 50 years. She placed each document on the judge's bench one at a time, carefully, deliberately. The courtroom so quiet you could hear the paper touching the wood. She saved the last document for the end. She held it up so the courtroom could see the letterhead. Then she read Charles Calloway's letter aloud. Every single word. Henry, I know what I did was wrong, but you'll never prove it. Let it go. Her voice was steady. The courtroom was not. Calloway's smirk was gone. Completely. His jaw was hanging slightly open. His lead attorney was flipping through a legal binder with frantic hands, looking for something that wasn't there. The Dallas lawyer was staring at the table. The color drained from Richard Calloway's face like water pouring from a cracked glass. He finally understood. The proof had been bolted inside that old truck for 50 years, waiting for this exact moment. Watch what the judge did next. Judge Samuel Ware, 70 years old, a Vietnam veteran, a man who'd farmed his own family's land before law school, examined every document for 40 minutes. He held each page under the desk lamp. Read every line. The courtroom didn't move, didn't whisper, barely breathed. Occasionally, he looked up at Calloway over the rims of his bifocals, then back down at the documents. His expression unreadable until the very end, when his jaw tightened. Then he set the last page down, folded his hands, and spoke. In 32 years on this bench, I have never seen a more clear-cut case of generational fraud. The American flag stood behind him. Every person in the gallery leaned forward. The mineral rights deed dated March 14, 1947, executed by Henry J. Briggs, is authentic, valid, and legally binding. The documents currently held by Calloway Energy are forgeries, consistent with the confession letter written by Charles R. Calloway himself. He paused, looked directly at Walter. Mr. Briggs, this court cannot give you back 50 years. It cannot give your father the justice he deserved in his lifetime. But it can, and it will, give you what is rightfully yours. Walter sat perfectly still, eyes wet but steady. He nodded once. A single, dignified nod. He was holding the edge of the table with both hands. This court hereby voids all mineral claims held by Calloway Energy on the Briggs property. And based on 50 years of documented extraction records, this court orders Calloway Energy to pay Walter Henry Briggs the sum of $4,700,000 in owed royalties, plus damages. A gasp rolled through the courtroom like a wave. A woman in the back row covered her mouth with both hands. An old rancher in the third pew gripped the bench in front of him until his knuckles went white, tears on faces that hadn't cried in decades. Then Judge Ware turned to face Richard Calloway III. Mr. Calloway, I am referring this matter immediately to the district attorney for criminal prosecution, fraud, forgery, and theft by deception. Bailiff. Two deputies approached the defendant's table. One held a pair of steel handcuffs. Calloway looked at his three attorneys. Not one of them would meet his eyes. Richard Calloway III, the man who kicked over a widow's rocking chair, who dropped a dead woman's photograph into the mud, who told Walter Briggs he had 30 days to erase his entire life, stood up and held out his wrists. The handcuffs clicked shut. His gold Rolex sat just above the steel. His face was not arrogant anymore. Not powerful. Small. Hollow. The face of a man who just discovered that a dirt farmer in a JCPenney jacket had beaten him with the truth. He was walked down the center aisle, past every person he had ever squeezed, bullied, and cheated. Past the farmers. Past the ranchers. Past the widows. His head down. His Italian shoes clicking on the hardwood. Not a single one of them said a word. Not a whisper. Not a sound. They didn't need to say anything. Silence from people who've been kept quiet their whole lives. That's the loudest sound there is. Walter drove home that evening the same way he'd driven to court that morning. Alone, in his 1998 Chevy pickup, windows cracked, the ammunition box riding on the passenger seat beside him. Right where Margaret used to sit. He parked in front of the house, walked up the porch steps, and set Margaret's photograph back on the railing. This time in a new oak frame he'd made in the barn the night before. Sanded smooth. Finished with linseed oil. The way he would have done anything for her. Margaret's face, untouched and radiant, smiling in that yellow sundress. New frame. Same smile. The evening light making it glow. He sat down in the rocking chair. The one he built. The one Calloway kicked off the porch. The one that was still right here, where it had always been, where it would always be. He looked out at his land. The wheat fields stretching toward the horizon. The oil derricks still pumping in the fading light. Only now, every drop was his. He used part of the money to pay off the back taxes on every farm in the county. Not just his own. 17 families. Some of them he barely knew. Didn't matter. He knew what it felt like to stare at an envelope with a red stamp and wonder if you'd make it through the winter. He drove his old Chevy up to neighboring farmhouses, handed envelopes to people at their doors. A handshake that became a hug. An old woman crying on her porch, clutching the envelope to her chest. He donated $50,000 to the County Veterans Hall. Paid to fix the roof on the Methodist church that had been leaking for 6 years. And at the high school in town, he set up a scholarship in Margaret's name. A small bronze plaque was mounted on the wall at the school, engraved, "The Margaret Briggs Memorial Scholarship for students who work hard and never quit." Walter never left that farm. Didn't buy a mansion. Didn't buy a sports car. Didn't move to the city. He kept working the land. Got up before dawn, same as always. Fed the animals. Mended fences. Drank his coffee on the porch and watched the sun come up over the same fields his father had plowed. Same boots. Same jacket. Same man. His old blue heeler walking beside him toward the barn every morning. Because Walter Briggs understood something that 3 generations of Callaways never could. Wealth is not what you take from people. It's what you build with your hands, and what you leave behind for those who come after you. The American flag on the porch caught the last breeze of the day. The rocking chair moved gently, just barely, as if someone you can't quite see was still sitting in it. The wheat fields turned gold. The sky burned orange and purple, and the oil derricks stood silhouetted on the horizon. Richard Calloway had the money. He had the lawyers. He had the power. But he didn't have the one thing that mattered, the truth. Henry Briggs hid it in a rusted truck for 50 years, and it still won. What would you have done if you opened that ammunition box? Tell us in the comments. You can buy the land. You can buy the lawyers. You can buy the silence. But you cannot buy what Henry Briggs bolted to the bed of that old Ford truck. You cannot buy the truth. And the truth doesn't rust. That 1951 Ford F1 is still sitting in the barn. A single beam of light falls across the open ammunition box. The stencil on the lid reads SGT H. Briggs. And it will read that way long after every Callaway is forgotten.